Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. I'm Miriam Cates, standing in for Jacob Rees-Mogg on State of the Nation tonight. As Labour begins an overhaul of the education system, I'll be speaking to two women on the front line of the battle to protect our children. Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, joins me in just a moment, followed by London mother Claire Page, who is appealing a court's decision to block parents from knowing what is being taught to their children. Meanwhile, the BBC has pledged to cut more than 100 jobs while spending tens of millions of pounds of your money on diversity initiatives. Plus, as Priti Patel becomes the first of the Tory leadership candidates to be eliminated, I'll be joined by the former chief Brexit negotiator, Lord Frost, once described as the greatest Frost since the Great Frost of 1709. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined later by my panel, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and Lois McClatchy-Miller, who is the senior legal communications officer at the Alliance for Defending Freedom. As ever, let me know your views throughout the programme. Email mailmog@gbnews.com. Now it's time for the news bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Miriam, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 8 o'clock. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is now underway. The Home Office has confirmed it will not use RAF Scampton to house asylum seekers. Labour has scrapped the former Conservative government's plans to house asylum seekers at the former RAF base in Lincolnshire. Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the plan, which has already cost £60 million, fails to deliver value for money for the taxpayer. Meanwhile, it's being reported that Germany is considering their own Rwanda migrant scheme using UK facilities. Germany's Special Representative for Migration Agreements, Joachim Stamp, said the EU could use facilities set up by the last UK government. Labour cancelled the Rwanda scheme, which was intended to deter migrants planning to cross the English Channel in small boats when they entered office. Downing Street said it would not comment on the discussions between two foreign governments. In France, the EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in a bid to resolve the political gridlock after the summer's snap election. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history, taking over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. And 7 in 10 children aged 9 to 13 have encountered harmful online content. That's according to new research. 20% of children in that age group have also been contacted online by strangers, while 17% have viewed dangerous online challenges. Despite spending on average 23 hours online a week, parents are being warned about underestimating their children's screen time. The government insists it's committed to creating a safer online world, with ministers saying it's vital for children and the health of the wider society. And presenter Jeremy Kyle has defended his former TV programme at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm Miriam Cates and I'm standing in for Jacob Rees-Mogg tonight. Now, what could be more important than the education of our children? Education was one of the few areas of success for the last Conservative government, with English primary school children now 4th in the world for reading and 11th for maths. There's much to celebrate. But it's not all rosy. Unnecessary lockdowns widened the previously shrinking attainment gap between rich and poor children. 150,000 ghost children are still persistently absent from school. We have rising numbers of exclusions, and many more children are not ready for school. Last year, a shocking 25% of 4-year-olds started school still wearing nappies. And, under the Conservatives, many schools drifted into mission creep, moving away from teaching accepted subject knowledge and skills and into the terrain of contested beliefs and values. Indeed, some schools seem to be actively hostile towards families, seeing parents as the enemy and even keeping secrets about their children. And later on the programme, we'll be hearing from a mother who has had to resort to court action to find out what her daughter was being taught in sex education. There's a lot wrong with our education system, and the new Labour government may be about to make it all worse, starting with a curriculum review led by a professor who has expertise not in maths or in English or in science, but in gender studies. Labour has scrapped one-word Ofsted judgments, and unions are now putting pressure on the government to end testing in primary schools, threatening to drive down standards. The Labour government is scrapping VAT relief on independent schools, a politics of envy that threatens the state sector with overcrowding and will end the educational dreams of many children with special needs. Labour seems to have no interest in tackling the issue of children's use of smartphones and social media, one of the major causes of poor behaviour. And instead of restoring authority and responsibility to parents, Labour want to take it away, proposing that teachers, not parents, should brush children's teeth. Our education system should support parents to raise their children. But the left sees parents as the problem, and education as an opportunity to drive social change by indoctrinating children with so-called progressive ideas and encouraging them to reject rather than respect our nation's inheritance. And those on the left often have very low expectations of children, particularly poor children, wrongly believing that children will wither under boundaries and challenge, rather than seeing firm discipline as the foundation of achievement. As ever, our email address remains the same. Let me know your views throughout the programme via mailmog@gbnews.com. Now, to discuss the state of education, I caught up with Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbal-Singh, following another set of outstanding exam results at her Michaela Community School. I asked her what's different about her approach to school discipline and why does it draw so much criticism?
There are lots of things that we do differently, and it doesn't necessarily sit well with people's sentimentalities in 2024. We are very, very strict, and, you know, we have corridors that are more or less silent. We say good afternoon, good morning, but that's it. We walk in single file very quickly to our lessons. Children would never turn around and listen to talk to somebody else. You know, they work very hard. We give them lots of homework. We expect a lot of them. And of course, that then does mean that they deliver on the results in terms of their GCSEs and their A-levels. But we also teach them some very traditional values. And sometimes people don't like the values that we teach them. So personal responsibility, for instance, that they're responsible for themselves. In 2024, there's much more of a sort of victimhood culture outside of our walls, where, you know, people will say, well, the child is poor, or the child is black, or the child is, you know, struggling at home for whatever reason. Therefore, it would be wrong to hold him to account for doing his homework. Whereas we always say, no, it doesn't matter whatever's happening at home. You need to get your homework into school. Those kinds of, there are excuses that are made all the time, saying that life is particularly difficult for a child for reasons outside of their control. And then standards are lowered, I feel, and we don't do that. We insist that our children work hard, whoever they are, whatever their background is, they all need to produce the same standard of work.
So talking about standards, are you concerned that Labour have scrapped the Ofsted one-word judgment? Do you think that will reduce the accountability of schools, or is that a good move?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's my position on Ofsted is complicated. I think that Ofsted is not necessarily a force for good with those judgments. I do think that Ofsted can be very distracting for schools, and they end up simply doing what they think Ofsted wants, which is the wrong thing to do for your school. It means that you end up being obsessed with bureaucracy as opposed to being out on the ground doing the right things for the kids. So in theory, I'm for abandoning Ofsted judgments, but I think that needs to be done in a culture of transparency. So at Michaela, for instance, we invite anyone to come and visit us. You just go on the website, you sign up, and you can come and have a tour and see the school. In most schools, it's impossible to visit. And I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. And, you know, it's easy to know what orange juice you want when you go to the shop, because you can taste the pulp and you can taste the no pulp. If you're unable to really get into a school and see it at work, then how is your choice in choosing schools valid? How does that, you don't really have choice if you don't know what you're choosing. So I think it's fine not to have Ofsted judgments as long as you have transparency, and government should be doing both at the same time. They ought to be encouraging a system of transparency where all schools are more or less forced to open to the public. And, you know, I don't see that happening. So that's where the concern comes, because then, well, I don't know, you know, what are schools up to? We don't know. Mm.
And whether or not Ofsted is the right vehicle for driving change, of course, there have been some successes in school standards over the last few years, and some people are worried that that's going to change under Labour. Are you optimistic about the new government, or are you concerned about their approach to education? I'm thinking particularly about the curriculum review that's being led by someone who isn't an expert in maths or science or English, but in gender studies, for example.
Yeah, so that's a concern. I'm also reading that they're wanting to bring back modular courses and coursework. I mean, thank goodness we abandoned coursework years ago under Michael Gove. He made the right decision with that, because it just gives middle-class children the opportunity to get their parents to help them with their coursework and to get the top grades. And the children who come from less privileged backgrounds are at a great disadvantage when it comes to coursework. So it's just absolutely maddening, the idea that we would want to reintroduce that ability for middle-class children to rig it so that they will definitely get the better results, not because they're working so hard, but their parents are able to work quite hard with them. Or tutors, for instance, would be able to help them with that. And it does just rig their GCSE results.
Yes.
So it's not a true reflection of the ability and the hard work of the child. So that worries me. It worries me that they introduced this change on Ofsted because it makes teachers feel bad. It makes leaders feel bad. One should never have policy based on the way in which we feel. You know, what are the facts? What's the reality? Is this going to be a good thing for schools or a bad thing for schools? You know, leaders, you know, we're paid more than the teachers for a reason. We need to carry that responsibility. Now, it may not be the right thing to do, giving judgments, because it doesn't actually help schools. That's a different point. But the fact that they did it because they're worried about our feelings, well, I don't want them to be worried about my feelings. I want them to be worried about standards. And I want them to enable a system which is able to support us head teachers in delivering the very best education for our children.
And one final question, if I may. Obviously, teachers receive a lot of criticism, but you've been quite critical of parenting sometimes as well. What one thing could parents do to improve their children's chances in education?
Yeah, well, not give them a smartphone. They should not give them a smartphone until after 16. They are the most dangerous things on the planet. Parents don't realize. They make nice babysitters, and let's face it, that's why we all do it. We give them a smartphone because it keeps them busy. But you have no idea who has access to your child, everyone from a gang member to a pedophile, putting your child in danger. But then there's also the business of the smartphone breaking their brains. They're not going to read very much. They'll get to a point where they don't read at all. A book is black and white and flat. A smartphone has all sorts of colors and pop-ups and games and all kinds of things, and the child will just not really be interested in reading. And then you'll say, oh, well, actually, he was never interested in reading. No, 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 you did that to him. So it really is, I strongly say to parents, do not give them a smartphone. They'll get the best possible, if you don't, they'll get the best possible GCSEs. They'll know how to organize their time. They won't be addicted.
Catherine, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Catherine Burville-Singh there, very controversial but highly successful head teacher. And sticking with the theme of transparency in schools, I'm now joined by Claire Page, someone who's been fighting on the front line for transparency in schools. Thank you so much for joining me, Claire. You're a mother from London. Tell me your story.
Yes, well, it began in 2021, so quite a while ago now, when my eldest daughter had a sex education lesson. And I was told in advance that the lesson would be about consent, which I thought was a good subject, and I had the right to withdraw her from that, but chose to let her go. And when she returned, she communicated that actually this lesson was about quite a lot besides. So she'd been told about heteronormativity and that this was a bad thing. We lived in a heteronormative world that we needed to change. And she'd also been told that she should be sex positive in her attitude to relationships. I thought this was controversial, actually. And so I looked up the provider when I, after the lesson, and I kind of found things on the website that really concerned me. There were lesson plans that asked children to engage in sexual dialogue, and there were also links that went on to what I can only describe really as adult sexually explicit material. I felt that was inappropriate, so I asked to see the lesson plan, which I think a lot of parents might do. And the school said they were unable to give that to me, and talked about copyright control and commercial secrecy or these ideas. And so I made a Freedom of Information request, which I thought, this is a state-funded school, surely they will need to provide me this information. And the school declined. So I went to the Information Commissioner and, made an appeal against that decision. And he sided with the school and the RSE company, which I was really surprised about. And so then I appealed in court at the first-tier tribunal, and I lost that case. So at that point, I think this became something of a national issue, really. You know, parents noticed, and I think so many people felt that parents should be able to see and have a copy of what their kids are taught. And so I'm still appealing that in the upper tribunal.
OK, a shocking story. Now, I should say that GB News has been in contact with the provider concerned, and they claim that they have been targeted and threatened. They claim their work is potentially life-saving. They deny all allegations of inappropriate presentations, that they've adhered with relevant legislation, they're evidence-based, and they say they've never refused parents access to their content. But nevertheless, it's a live issue. Should parents have access to their children's education lessons?
They certainly should, and to slightly disagree there, I do not have a copy of this lesson and I don't possess it, and so I don't have access to that material, and that's really why I'm in court. So absolutely, parents need to be able to have a copy.
I think our viewers will be shocked that anybody could claim that something that the taxpayer is paying for, so some materials used in school, children bring home maths textbook. If a children can bring home a maths textbook, why can't they bring home sex education lessons?
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, the way that the ICO has put it is that, and the way that the School of Sexuality Education, who has said they want to keep their material sort of secret, if you like, is that it's a commercial secret and it needs to protect their commercial interests. And that if some other competitor sees this work, then, you know, that they will lose income. But I think something else is going on with RSE, really. For me, I think that very controversial issues are being discussed. I think the RSE industry knows that parents are, some parents disagree with that and will push against it. So I think they're actually using commercial secrecy and interests as an excuse for actually keeping this at arm's length from parents.
Now, earlier this year, the previous Secretary of State under a Conservative government did write to schools saying that they should share materials and they shouldn't be bound by any contracts that prevent them. So why did you then not win the case? And are you expecting to have a different result next time?
Yes. Well, there's a slight difference between being able to see and being able to possess a copy. And I think that's the difference. So we haven't really got to the point where anyone in politics has said parents should be able to possess a copy.
I see.
Now, it's really important to actually have a copy. First of all, you can scrutinise it, but secondly, you can act on what you see. So I can make a formal complaint to my governors. I can go to Ofsted or education authorities and say I'm concerned, and it's really essential for safeguarding. What actually has been proposed as a sort of compromise is perhaps a parent can go in and have a look on the premises and then come away. Well, they've got no proof of what they've seen. They can't show, they can't discuss, can't have that open dialogue.
That isn't transparency.
Yeah, it's not. And
And finally, this must have taken its toll on you. Why did you decide to go public, and has it been really tough?
It has been tough. I've taken some flack, but for me, it's a matter of principle. I think the primacy of the family needs looking after. I think anything that children are taught, you know, parents should have the similar kind of access that teachers have. They should be able to look at the copies. And I also think there's, you know, there's a lot of politicisation going on in schools at the moment. And we've got a really great piece of law, Section 406, 407 in the Education Act, which says kids can't be indoctrinated in school. And in order for us to help that be enforced, make our complaints as we need to and point out problems, we have to have a copy and say, you know, this is not impartial education. So that's about protecting democracy, actually.
Amazing. Claire, you've been incredibly brave, and I'm sure our viewers will very much appreciate. In fact, polling shows that the vast majority of parents do think that schools should be completely transparent about what their children are learning. So thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time. And in a moment, after the break, we will be hearing from you. So during the break, please do email in, send over your views. Plus, can you guess how much the BBC is spending on its diversity drive? We'll be back after the break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
More than half of people aged 50 and over feel happier from having a friendship, and 46% feel a sense of belonging too. Tomorrow is the start of Friendship Month. The Oddfellows, a non-profit friendly society that provides older adults with opportunities to create new friendships, is now inviting more people this September to join their local groups and expand their friendship circles through giving a taster activity at local community centres. We're joined now by Jane Nelson, who's the CEO of Oddfellows. Good morning, Jane. Thanks for joining us. As someone in my mid-30s, I've even noticed as well that my own friendship group has diminished over the years as kind of, you know, people get married and have kids and they kind of drift apart and don't make time for each other.
How important is it to have friends separate to your family? What benefit does that bring you?
As you do get older, you do lose friends for a variety of reasons. Either you lose touch or they have an illness or they pass away as you get older. The stats show that people love spending time with their friends. It always takes somebody, doesn't it? Somebody's got to make that first step to send a text to say, do you fancy meeting up for coffee or do you fancy going to the pub or whatever the arrangement's going to be. But sometimes somebody always has to make that first step and text or phone. And I think the other key thing is it usually tends to be the same person, but that doesn't matter as long as that connectivity is made, because that's what you need. You need the connectivity. If you think about when we were children, we'd go around the playground and say, will you be my friend? Well, we don't tend to do that as we get older. But be brave, look on Oddfellows website, see all the amazing events we've got on, go to see what's going on in your area, oddfellows.co.uk, or you can telephone 0800 028 1810, and our team will be more than happy to point them in the right direction of their local events, and there's so much going on, 300 going on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm Miriam Cates, standing in for Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. And we've been discussing Labour's education changes with Catherine Birbalsingh and Claire Page, and you've been getting in touch with your views during the break. Now, Catherine says education shouldn't just be about results. Maybe that's one of the reasons so many don't want to attend. That approach doesn't work for all of our kids. Thank you, Catherine. And Robert says, the same thing happened in America years ago. Dumb down the kids, devalue family values and structure. Then it's easy to divide and conquer, all through brainwashing. And John says, Jacob, you look fantastic. Can't make up my mind if it's the hair or what, but your stylist should have a raise. On with the show, good luck and enjoy. Thank you, John, much appreciated. Well, now I'm joined by my panel for reaction. We've got GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and social commentator, Lois McClatchy-Miller. Thank you both so much for joining me. Now, Nigel, Catherine Birbalsingh there was quite critical of Labour's approach to education. Will Ofsted be providing the kind of guidance for schools that it needs to do? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, will it? We don't know yet, because we haven't actually seen what this report card that replaces the two words they had before. So we have to see. And I think that quite clearly Ofsted needs complete reform. There are so many things wrong with it. The idea of you missing one mark out of 100, which is a tick box exercise, then you go down a grade. Even the coroner, after Ruth Perry's suicide, said much the same, that didn't work. There are other areas where state boarding schools, they send in, because they haven't got any inspectors who've got any experience of boarding, what they do is they send in social workers. Well, a boarding school is not a children's home. So reform is really needed. And I mean, Labour put aside about £45 million to do it.
And Ofsted, of course, say that their job is to judge. They're not there to support schools into improvement. They're there to provide a judgment for parents. But do you think parents really do look at Ofsted results when they're choosing a school for their children?
They certainly do look at the one-word thing. I mean, obviously, you would send your child to an outstanding school if you possibly could. Much better to know what it's outstanding in. It may have dropped a point somewhere else and just be good. So what you need to know is get a much clearer idea of what the school is, the discipline, the behaviour, the educational attainment, rather than have it in one word. But I mean, to do that, what it needs is a bit more on a report card, which is being planned. As I say, we don't know yet what that'll contain, but provided it's simple enough, parents should be able to get a better idea about schools.
And are the left too soft on discipline?
I think that, I listened to Catherine earlier on, I mean, it depends how you go. If her system works, then great, but you take, say, a school like Bedales, and they would argue that strict discipline just causes bad behaviour, and the best way is to give kids freedom because they get more insight. Now, whichever side you believe, that there are different views on the educational establishment,
Lois, we heard from Claire Page earlier, a shocking story.
Absolutely.
Legally, why can't she see what her children are being taught?
Well, it's bizarre, Miriam, because the right, every parent has the prior right to know the education of the kids, to choose the education of the kids, and that is baked into international human rights law. It's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's that foundational, that fundamental. But of course, besides the legal arguments, we have to ask, why not? What is in this material?
What are they hiding?
Schools feel that they cannot show parents what is going on. And this is a wider trend, isn't it, that we're seeing of children being treated as adults, adults being treated as children. And you see it in education, but also it rippling out in other social policies across the United Kingdom.
Good point. I mean, Nigel, is there ever a case for schools to hide from parents what they're teaching children?
Well, you've got to look at what the Department of Education guidance is for this. I mean, what schools have to do is put out their relationship and sex education policies. There's got to be easily available, preferably on their website, and all parents can see what their children are going to be taught. I think, first of all, parents can't have a veto over that. What they can do is request from the school, look, I don't want my son or daughter to be in that particular section of the curriculum. But you can't actually look at every single lesson. If you know generally what the policy is, that you're fine with it, I mean, you just got to go along with the government
Unfortunately,
guidelines.
some schools try to get around that by saying it's health education, not sex education, then they can't withdraw their children. But we have to move on to some other news today, in which the BBC is set to lay off 100 jobs as it's supposedly struggling with its funding. Yet they're clearly not in too much trouble, because they've just announced an extra £80 million of funding for a diversity drive. I'm told here at GB News we do hire on merit alone, but we'll see. Lois, is there still a place for a national, publicly funded broadcaster?
I certainly don't think in this iteration, no. I mean, the BBC have, on many occasions, showed their ideological colours. And if they want to do that, they can't be a national broadcaster. They can't be taxpayer funded. We have to have impartiality to a much higher standard if they want to continue in that vein. And as we see today, you know, a policy of DEI hiring that is saying that, you know, it's not about based on merit, it's not about how talented somebody is, it's just simply based on, you know, their colour of their skin, whatever it could be, what aspect that they are hiring on. And that's actually very offensive to most people who are applying for jobs at the BBC, who are talented, who are getting there on their own merit, no matter what their skin colour and whether they're male or female or anything else to do with their identity. So, yeah, I think it's a real nail in the coffin these days to hear these stories coming out about what used to be a very respected institution.
Yeah. Nigel, £80 million for diversity? Perhaps they could do with some more diversity of viewpoints?
It's a small point there. It's for programming. So it's diverse programming backed up by diverse production people. So 80 million is not unusual for the programming. I think Lois is right, by the way. I think that the BBC needs to actually work out now what they ought to be. Streaming services are producing great and big budget dramas that the BBC used to be masters at. They still produce good stuff, but Do we need light entertainment there? Is news worth the most important thing to preserve, especially local news, local radio? Where does the money go?
I mean, as somebody with small c conservative views, I'd be sad to see such a big national institution go. But on the other hand, how can they defend, especially the curated content that's so different often to other mainstream media? I mean, do you think there's the case to scrap the licence fee now and move to a pay-per-view model?
I think there's certainly a case. And I agree with you, it is sad, you think of the royal wedding, you think of these great moments of British life, and you love the BBC commentary and that prestige it brings. But realistically, we're not having a royal wedding every day, it's not
a shame.
A shame, I would love it, but we can't afford it and it's not happening. And so in that case, if we're not able to sustain it just on these big national moments alone, can we really justify it for the material that it's producing? Could we not move to a more subscription-based model?
And Nigel, a final word from you. Those on the right often complain that the BBC is biased towards the left. Do those on the left have a similar complaint?
Of course. I mean, the last Labour government, that Alistair Campbell was under the BBC constantly complaining about bias. So whoever's in government hates the BBC.
Well, maybe the BBC are much more impartial than we think. Well, thank you to my panel. They'll be joining me again later. Now, in a moment, as French President Macron appoints former EU chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier as Prime Minister, I'll be joined by a man who knows him better than most. Lord Frost will be here in just a moment.
Hello again, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's been a miserable end to the day for the south and southwest, and we'll see further spells of heavy rain during the next 24 to 48 hours. Around this area of low pressure that's sitting over the continent, that's pushing some weather fronts up into the south, but they are tending to stall. Having said that, overnight, the heaviest of the rain will tend to fizzle away for a time. Still some heavy showers around towards the southeast, Wales for a time. But otherwise, a lot of cloud across the UK, especially in the south and the east. That low cloud will lead to a misty start in places on Friday morning and a mild start, 15 to 17 Celsius, a muggy night to come for many of us. But it's not going to be cloudy everywhere. Certainly towards western Scotland, we'll see blue skies first thing on Friday. Plenty of sunshine out there and already a warm start to the day. It's going to get warmer as the day progresses. Northern Ireland seeing some decent sunshine, particularly towards the west. Likewise for southwest Scotland, Cumbria, Lancashire, North Wales. These are the areas where we didn't see much summery weather during the summer, but on Friday and Saturday, we'll see plenty of warm sunshine instead. The Midlands, East Anglia, some sunshine for a time, but across South Wales into the south of England, mostly around the M4 corridor and southwards, there'll be thick cloud and there'll be heavy outbreaks of rain on and off through the day, increasingly focused across parts of Somerset, Devon and Cornwall. That could cause some issues, localised flooding, transport disruption, that sort of thing. But elsewhere, we've got the sunshine, 25 to 27 Celsius, even as far north as northwest Scotland. Now, Saturday starts off similarly, but as we go through the day, there'll be less rain, I think, across southern parts. Still some showery outbreaks around, but otherwise a few drier interludes to be had as well. A lot of cloud elsewhere, increasingly so through the weekend, and becoming a little cooler.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm Miriam Cates, and tonight I'm standing in for Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. And we've been discussing Labour's plans for education and also the BBC. And you've been in touch with your views on our email address. And here are a couple. Marianne says, isn't it a contradiction in terms to ask a parent to give permission for their child to sit in a lesson, but then deny that same parent the access to the content? Well, yes, I think that's a really good point, Marianne. And I think one of the problems is that in a lot of subjects like maths and science, most people accept what is fact. They accept the kind of knowledge that children need to have. But of course, in sex education and relationships, there's no real consensus. There's no agreement about what should be taught. So it's all a lot more controversial. And Brian says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by their character. And the best person will get the job regardless of their skin colour. Very good point. It should all be about merit, although I think the BBC definitely need a bit more diversity of viewpoint, as some of our viewers have been saying. Now, on to some other news. The first casualty from the Tory leadership contest has been announced, and the race looks closer than ever. Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are vying for first place on the MP votes. Robert Jenrick got 22 votes and Kemi Badenoch got 22 votes yesterday. And Dame Priti Patel has been knocked out of the race. She got 14 votes. And I'm now joined by former chief Brexit negotiator Lord Frost. David, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
It's a pleasure.
It was quite close yesterday, the race, especially amongst the bottom 5 candidates.
That's right. I mean, I think obviously the campaigns were doing the best they could to work out who might vote for who, but I don't think anybody really knew. And obviously there are not many MPs now, sadly, and small movements make a large difference. So I think everybody is reassessing in the light of yesterday's results.
So I think 14 votes went to Priti Patel. Where do you think those voters will go? Will the MPs move en masse to a different candidate, or will they make up their minds separately?
I mean, it's difficult to tell because the policy similarity isn't the only factor at play. You might assume that her votes would go to Robert Jenrick or perhaps to Kemi Badenoch, but, you know, personal friendships, calculations about what might happen in the next round compared to this one, all of those things make a difference. As you probably know, I've come out to support Robert Jenrick, and I think he has got a bit of momentum, obviously, out of yesterday. I think it surprised a few people that he'd come first, and certainly, you know, we feel his campaign is beginning to pull in people from all sides of the party and build up a head of steam. But there's a long way to go.
There is.
So let's see.
And of course, the last stage will be the members, Conservative Party members, choosing between the final 2. If that was Robert Jenrick against Kemi Badenoch, who do you think would win amongst the members?
Well, I hope and believe in those circumstances that Robert would win, but obviously I think it'd be a pretty tough fight. And, you know, they both represent similar currents of opinion within the party, I guess.
And of course, the key question is, could either of them lead the Conservatives to a victory at the next election, or is that just too big an ask?
Well, I think we could. I mean, obviously there are many good candidates in this election, and it's good that with only 120 MPs, we've still got quite a lot of good potential leadership candidates. I think Robert is the guy I wanted to give my support to, because I found him saying so many similar things to me about the size of the state, the economy, about migration, about Brexit, but also because he's shown he's a person of principle. I resigned on principle a few years back, and so did Robert over immigration. And I think that really counts for something. So I think Robert really feels that, for me, he's the candidate who most gets both the degree of the challenge, but also, to your point, that, you know, we shouldn't give up.
Yes.
This is absolutely winnable. We already know this is a bad Labour government. 5 years, quite a long time. There's a lot that needs to be done. It really is a lot, but it can be done with a proper plan.
I suppose the question people will have is, in opposition, how can you prove that you'll be effective? The Conservatives made lots of promises over the course of the last Parliament. They didn't deliver. How can people be sure, let's say Robert wins, let's say Kemi Badenoch wins, how can they be sure that they'll be delivered if the Conservative Party gets back to power?
That is probably the biggest difficulty we've got now, and I've written a bit about this in the Telegraph tonight. I think one thing we can do, obviously, is be extremely clear about what we're going to do, extremely clear about the plan, make sure there's no internal arguments about things, and get people to row in behind them. I think any sense of hesitation or let's wait till 2029 and see how things look and we'll take decisions then, I think any of that is fatal when trust levels are so low.
Yeah.
Got to be so clear now.
An interesting few weeks to come. Well, while I have you with me, we have to cover one of the other big stories of the day, which is about Michel Barnier, the former chief Brexit negotiator, who you got to know very well in your previous role, has been appointed by President Macron as the Prime Minister. And we should say the French have been without a Prime Minister for quite some time now. How do you react to this news?
Well, I always thought he might come back. Obviously, he made a run at the presidency for the right a couple of years back and didn't work out, but he's still around and he's a serious French politician. So I'm pleased personally, I guess, that he's still around. I would say two things, I suppose, about him. I think the first is that he was a very effective negotiator, did a very professional job for the European Union. And I'm afraid if Theresa May had done as good a job for us as he did for them, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in today. So I've got no complaints about that. I think he was tough, but, that position was tough. And that was that. I think the other thing I would say was that he did, I think towards the end, we sensed there were some differences within the EU position. I think Michel was perhaps a bit tougher than the rest of the Commission, was more willing to contemplate not reaching an agreement. The Commission really wanted an agreement, and I think he felt they threw a few things out of the bus at the end. I know he didn't like the deal on fisheries, for example, which I know that our industry thought was not great, but I could tell you the French also thought was extremely bad. We are getting our fisheries waters back in a couple of years, and he didn't like that. So that was some of the tensions at the end.
Well, President Macron's clearly hoping that he can be equally effective. I mean, the French politics is in a real dilemma at the moment. They've had this election, the populist right won the first stage, the extreme left won the second. Can Barnier be the one to bring the two sides together, or is chaos baked into French politics?
It does look really difficult. I mean, it does seem that Macron made a misjudgment in calling the election and then
another
getting
similarity
it wrong.
with you, isn't it?
Yes, it's easily done, unfortunately. It does not look like that there's an obvious coalition to get a majority of votes and get him in place permanently. And who knows how this is going to play out. The French system was designed by a rather autocratic figure, President de Gaulle, and it's designed to work in a particular way, and it doesn't really work like that anymore, and they're having to find their way through it.
There's quite a similarity, really, across Western nations now with the rise of populism, the rise of the extreme left as well, and actually traditional democratic systems that were meant to bring these sides together are actually breaking down. We've seen something similar in Germany last week. Is this a trend that's going to continue?
I think it is. What we're seeing is that the mainstream parties on centre-right, centre-left, they're not responding to the actual concerns of voters in many areas. So you're getting people giving up on them and going out to one end or the other. And, there's only so far, there's only so long you can keep saying, we're not going to deal with you if, a third of the electorate have voted for you. And that's the problem they've now got into. It could happen here. I don't think we could be immune for that. And that's why I keep saying the Conservative Party's in a fragile position.
Yes, and it may still not come back from.
It may not.
We've
got to take the right decisions to make sure we do get back. So, we can learn from what's happened in France as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. Really, really appreciate your time. Fantastic to have you on the show. And if you want to hear more from Lord Frost, you can catch up on Chopper's political podcast tomorrow at 6 a.m. I assume that's been pre-recorded. And we'll be getting into more of what we've just discussed with Lord Frost in a moment after the break. Please join me then.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, and we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at. When you think they're the future, we've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, it's really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay, from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm Miriam Cates, and back with me in the studio to react to what Lord Frost has just told us regarding the Tory leadership election and French politics is my panel for tonight. We've got GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and social commentator Lois McClatchy-Miller. So, Nigel, surely Labour must be rubbing their hands in glee. More Conservative infighting, more voting, more leadership contests.
Yeah, indeed.
Who do you most fear?
I keep being asked this question. I'm not sure they fear anybody. I mean, had Nigel Farage ended up in the Conservative Party and was part of this leadership election, then I think that, yes, Labour would definitely have feared him. The present bunch, I'm not so sure. At the moment, we're talking about two right-wingers, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch seem to be in the lead. That seems peculiar when you've elections just happened and a left-of-centre party has just won it. So the idea of going further right doesn't seem to be the right
But if you look at, obviously, we do have this first past the post system, and you're absolutely right, Labour won a big majority. But if you actually look at the voting figures, if you combine the votes of the Conservatives and the Reform Party, actually there's nothing in it between the left and the right, as you said.
No, indeed. I mean, it was a really weird election. I mean, we ended up in a situation where a third of the vote delivered two-thirds of the MPs. That's odd, which means the Tories do have a chance next time round of actually winning it. It's just that the history of the Tory party in recent years, if you look at what happened after 97, they couldn't get it right. Then David Cameron came along, who was a bit of a Tony Blair clone, and suddenly you were back in power again. So the point I'm making is that you probably need to go on the back of whatever the Labour Party is doing to achieve power in 2029.
Lois, isn't Nigel right? So much is now about presentation, and whatever Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch might think, and however they perform in Parliament, is anybody actually watching Parliament anymore?
That is an interesting question, but to say that Conservatives lost to the left, I think is a complete misanalysis of what happened. What happened is the Conservatives punished the Conservative Party. The Conservatives voted for reform so that the Conservative Party would lose, because there is a generation of young Conservatives who are frustrated with a party that is only representing Labour but slower. Labour, but just a little bit less. No, we want a Conservative Party with Conservative values. This country is screaming out for family policies which support young people to get married, have kids, buy a house. And no person my age is able to really do that with much support. We have the highest loneliness rate we've ever seen in this country. We are struggling as a nation. We're struggling as a generation of young people, and we need a Conservative frame of mind, a Conservative framework on which to be able to base our lives. And yet, no political party with any power within my lifetime, basically, has been able to offer that to us. And that's why the Conservatives lost. And so for anyone in the Conservative Party to say we now need to look to the left has not paid attention to what happened. This is the time to reach out to the right. This is their last chance, honestly, to reach out to that dissident right, to say, no, we're here for you. We understand your concerns. We have messed up by being so woke. We've messed up by, it was Conservatives who oversaw this entire LGBT trans ideology come into our schools. It is who oversaw the woke ideology under which so many culture wars have been inflamed. So many people are so frustrated about the erasure of women, what children are learning in schools, and the wedge that is placed between parents and their children. It is time to reset. This is their moment to reset. If they miss their chance, they won't come back.
Nigel, that's certainly what I heard on the doorstep. You say you're Conservative, but you're not Conservative enough. But whenever I'm frustrated with British politics, I like to look across the channel and realise that we're in on not so much a mess as the French.
No, that's worse.
What's going on in France? Michel Barnier, he's Prime Minister? How's that going to go?
Well, largely because they couldn't find anybody else by the sound of it. And what you've got there is that both Macron and Barnier, they're centrists. They lean to the right when it comes to economics, so they want debt repayment, that sort of thing. So I can understand why he's now Prime Minister. Of course, the result of all this will be that they'll be hated by both the right and the left. So it's going to be a difficult kind of period for both of them.
But you're right. The French are in economic trouble. It's not just the social unrest that we see from over here. And actually, I think the EU are very concerned about French deficit. Do you think the appointment of Barnier is to give the Commission confidence that France can
bear in mind that both Macron and Barnier are arch pro-Europeans, so from that point of view, yes. But certainly on the economic policy, that would come as a relief in Brussels, although it may not come as a huge relief over in London.
We'll see. It's going to be an interesting few weeks. Now, up next, standing in for Martin Daubney, we've got Patrick Christie. Patrick's going to join me to tell me what's on... No, yes, Martin! Getting very confused. I'm Jacob. You're Patrick. Anyway, Martin, nice to see you. What's on your show tonight?
Miriam, we've all transitioned tonight. Tonight I'm asking the question, is the Labour Party the true nasty party? Should the Home Office be accountable when asylum seekers kill? I'll have Lee Anderson on the show looking ahead to that next Tuesday's debate, the vote on the winter fuel allowance. Who will be the meanest MPs in the roost? Plus my superstar panel, Alison Pearson, of course, from The Telegraph, and Lord Bailey. All coming up on my show. That's 9 till 11. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to my panel. Final words from you, Lois?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. And Jacob will be back, not me, on Monday at 8 o'clock. For now, I'm Miriam Cates, and this has been State of the Nation.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's been a miserable end to the day for the south and southwest, and we'll see further spells of heavy rain during the next 24 to 48 hours. Around this area of low pressure that's sitting over the continent, that's pushing some weather fronts up into the south, but they are tending to stall. Having said that, overnight, the heaviest of the rain will tend to fizzle away for a time. Still some heavy showers around towards the southeast, Wales for a time. But otherwise, a lot of cloud across the UK, especially in the south and the east. That low cloud will lead to a misty start in places on Friday morning and a mild start, 15 to 17 Celsius, a muggy night to come for many of us. but it's not going to be cloudy everywhere. Certainly towards western Scotland, we'll see blue skies first thing on Friday. Plenty of sunshine out there and already a warm start to the day. It's going to get warmer as the day progresses. Northern Ireland seeing some decent sunshine, particularly towards the west. Likewise for southwest Scotland, Cumbria, Lancashire, North Wales. These are the areas where we didn't see much summery weather during the summer, but on Friday and Saturday we'll see plenty of warm sunshine instead. The Midlands, East Anglia, some sunshine for a time, but across South Wales into the south of England, mostly around the M4 corridor and southwards, there'll be thick cloud and there'll be heavy outbreaks of rain on and off through the day, increasingly focused across parts of Somerset, Devon and Cornwall. That could cause some issues, localised flooding, transport disruption, that sort of thing. But elsewhere, we've got the sunshine, 25 to 27 Celsius, even as far north as northwest Scotland. Now, Saturday starts off similarly, but as we go through the day, there'll be less rain, I think, across southern parts. Still some showery outbreaks around, but otherwise a few drier interludes to be had as well. A lot of cloud elsewhere, increasingly so through the weekend, and becoming a little cooler.